Japan is a land of enormous beauty and culture. It is the land of the legendary samurai warriors. The samurai is a recurring figure in today's culture, but what was their role in ancient Japanese society? The word samurai means the one who serves. That was their main role, to serve a feudal lord, or even the emperor. Initially, the samurai collected taxes from the peasants. This work was not always peaceful. Therefore, the samurai began to use weapons and practice martial arts. They were also allowed to execute low-class citizens if they refused to pay the taxes required. The main duties of the samurai were to protect their lord's assets, to preserve order and customs, and to be loyal to their sovereign. Their growing influence increased respect for the samurai class, even being feared and hated by some citizens. Over time, many samurai accumulated wealth and land, but they were still considered an inferior class by the nobility with the increase in land disputes. Feudal lords hired more and more warriors as samurai. These feudal lords were known as Daimyo and obeyed only the emperor. In 1185, many feudal lords went to war, and after many battles, Minamoto no Yoritomo was the winner. Minamoto received the title of shogun, great commander of the army, and all other feudal lords were forced to swear loyalty to him. Thus, the first military dictatorship of Japan was born, the Kamakura Shogunate. During this period, the samurai class acquired military functions, and his authority became even greater. Simply looking a samurai in the eye or soiling his clothes could cost the life of a peasant to secure their place in society. Many samurai married women from noble families. Their children were trained from childhood as their successors. When they reached maturity, rich and powerful families of samurai were born. They were trained to fight either armed or unarmed. These ancient martial arts gave rise to judo, karate, aikido, and many other modern martial arts. Part of the payment to the samurai was made in sacks of rice, since this was the most important food of the time. After 400 years of relative peace, Japan entered a new turbulent period. The central government was weakened. Many feudal lords went to war again, seeking to achieve military control over the whole of Japan. This phase of the conflict became known as the Sengoku Jidai period of states at war, or period of civil war. It was the most troubled civil war in Japanese history. This was the period when the samurai were most prominent. Many men from different social classes fought hard on the battlefields in the hope of being recognized and given the title a samurai. The famous Miyamoto Musashi was one of them, having participated in the Battle of Sekigahara as warriors of the nobility. The samurai fought mainly on horseback. They first used the bow and arrow as their main weapon, but later they used the spear. The sword was only used when there were no other choices. Only samurai and rich people could wear 2 swords on their waists. The katana, a long sword, was worth a lot of money and was a symbol of power. The sword was thought to be the samurai's soul. The wakizashi was a short sword that samurai used when they were in close quarters. In tight or narrow spaces, the short sword was better than the katana. These 2 swords at the waist were a great way to show off your status. The samurai's armor was made of lacquered wood, silk, and small metal plates. These armors were fairly light and let you move around a lot without losing any of their protective qualities. The helmets were the heaviest thing. They were made of only metal and had the most different kinds of decorations. Some armor was made to scare off enemies. It must have been scary to see a samurai on the battlefield during the Sengoku Jidai. Things got bad in Japan, with fires, disease, and hunger affecting the people. Many feudal lords were afraid that their warriors had gotten too aggressive and ambitious. Bushido was made to control and discipline the samurai. It was a code of honor that the warriors were supposed to follow. Bushido means the way of the warrior. The code of conduct was based on a mix of ideas from different Eastern religions, like Buddhism and Shintoism. Bushido held justice, bravery, kindness, respect, truthfulness, honor, and duty in high regard. Samurai should also learn how to paint, write, and do other things that help them control themselves and get better. Most samurai valued honor above life itself. People remember your name and reputation long after you're gone. The cherry blossom, a flower that blooms only once a year and lasts for a few days, became the symbol of the samurai. A samurai's life should be like this. Live in the present, serve his daimyo, and die at the top of his game. Some people only wanted fame and power, and betrayals happened fairly often. The Battle of Sekigahara was won by Tokugawa Ieyasu, who then became the first shogun of the Tokugawa shogunate. Japan entered a new era of peace that lasted for almost 300 years. The samurai caste went down after the wars ended. Many lost their jobs or their masters. Some people killed themselves during the ceremony known as seppuku because they were ashamed of losing their social status. Some people decided to become merchants or police officers. A lot of them became ronin, or wandering samurai. In Japan, this word was used to describe samurai who didn't have a master and walked around aimlessly. They worked as mercenaries, bodyguards, and even criminals. Japan has been closed to foreign countries for most of its history and had limited trade with them. However, this started to change in 1854. Japan had to open its ports to trade with other countries because of a serious financial and business crisis. Japan got a lot of new things and improvements from this, but many people, mostly samurai families, were not happy with how the traditional Japanese way of life changed. These changes led to the Meiji Restoration, a time when samurai fought against the new government model. During the Meiji Restoration, the samurai class officially ended. The last members had to give up their swords. People who didn't do what they were told were arrested and punished. The time of the samurai was over. The Japanese government used propaganda during World War II to promote the samurai spirit. The goal was to boost morale and keep the soldiers busy on the front lines to help bring back the samurai spirit. Japanese officers got swords that were similar to the ones used by the samurai in ancient times. However, they were made in large numbers and were not nearly as good as the katanas, which are true works of art in modern Japan. Many samurai families still exist today, and people all over the world still follow their code of honor and practice their martial arts. So, the glory of the warriors of the rising sun will last forever. Saga Sleep. Japan had a lot of wars in the past between powerful and ambitious feudal lords. These wars were mostly fought on the battlefield, but there was also a world of shadows and stealth that only highly trained men and women could enter. The term ninja was not always used to refer to secret agents. The most common term was shinobi, which means the one who hides. In the beginning, ninjas were just spies who pretended to be ordinary people walking the streets and talking to citizens to get valuable information. Many of these agents pretended to be merchants, blacksmiths, artisans, and even monks. They used many disguises to achieve their goals, and nothing drew more attention than someone dressed in black and wearing a mask. Some became so skilled at pretending to be ordinary people that they spent years or even their entire lives as spies without anyone noticing. But on the other hand, security in castles and other important places got better. Many of these places were protected by very skilled samurai. It was very dangerous to be a spy. A lot of ninjas were killed after they were caught. The ninjas got really good at different kinds of martial arts. Taijutsu is the name for these arts. They mixed judo, jujutsu, aikido, karate, and kung fu, all of which were changed to cause serious injuries and end the fight as quickly as possible. But this wasn't enough to keep the ninjas safe, so they also learned how to use weapons. Ninjas were experts at using a lot of different weapons. Most of them were sneaky and used in small spaces like rooms or hallways. The Dreifu Makibishi was one of these weapons. It was a small iron junction that was thrown against the ground when a ninja was chased. It was very hard to see in the dark and caused a lot of damage when stepped on. It was very effective against horse-ridden pursuers. They could also carry a weapon called a kusarigama, which was a small sickle attached to a chain with a metallic weight at the other end. The kusarigama was hard to use and even harder to fight against. It had a huge range and could do a lot of damage with its chain. If that didn't work, the sickle was used. Tekokagi were weapons used on wrists, especially effective in hand-to-hand combat. Contrary to popular belief, the classic shurikens and kunai were not thrown to kill the enemy, but to wound him and take him out of the fight. They were thrown in a specific order to hit vital points on the body. Ninjas didn't use swords with straight blades. Most of them carried regular wakizashis or even katanas. To protect themselves, many ninjas wore chain mail under their kimono. In the end, they could throw a smoke bomb to blind the enemy and escape to safety in the shadows. As a child, I started training to be a ninja. They had to learn how to hide in a lot of different places, in addition to fighting techniques. They also needed to learn how to survive in the woods, how to climb walls and cliffs, and how to fight off hunger and sleep. The ninjas had to learn the different accents of different parts of Japan in order to be masters of the art. Using and handling gunpowder or poisons was also a very dangerous and delicate thing to do. The ninjas didn't follow the Bushido. They had their own rules for how to live and die. The information about this code of conduct is not very precise. It's in a document known as Bansen Shukai. The training also included meditation and breathing techniques, in addition to a practice called Kuji Kiri. It involved making signs by hand that stood for things like fire, wind, water, earth, and lightning, among other things. Kuji Kiri allowed a ninja to focus his mind and even distract his enemies. These new skills led to ninjas being chosen for assassination and sabotage missions. This work was considered dishonorable and dirty by most of the samurai and the general population. The ninjas were people despised by society, but vital agents during the Sengoku Jidai period. The ninjas emerged as a serious threat. They were hired as mercenaries and killed many generals, samurai, and nobles during the war. They also infiltrated castles. Inside them, they caused fires and poisoned the water or food wells. They even placed bombs, destroying the gates of the castle and allowing the entrance of soldiers. There were also female ninja, the kunoichi. Their main role was to infiltrate, where they pretended to be cooks or housekeepers to enter the castles and fortresses. The most beautiful could pretend to be geishas, the famous luxury courtesans. This helped them get even closer to their targets. People started calling these ninja skills ninjutsu. A lot of ninjas even fought in the open on battlefields, using strange tactics that scared and confused their enemies. During the Sengoku Jidai, some ninja families came up that were good at different secret arts. Two of these families were very important and formed strong clans. The Iga-ryu clan, which was based in the province of Iga, lived in a mountainous area that was hard to get to at the time. The Koka school, or tradition, was in the province of Omi, which is a wet area with rivers running through it. Because the land and climate were different, these two clans could come up with their own ways to spy on each other. These two ninja clans were secretly at war with each other. Their members ambushed each other, not only because they were paid to do so, but also to get rid of their enemies so they could take over the spying networks. As more ninjas did things, many of them became famous warriors. Hattori Hanzo, whose real name was Hattori Masanari, was the most famous. Hattori Hanzo was born in Iga, and, like all members of his clan, learned ninjutsu as a child. He worked as a samurai for Tokugawa when he was 16 years old. People called Ieyasu Hanzo Oni no Hanzo because he was so brave and savage on the battlefield. He was a master with the spear. The Devil Hanzo. One of Hanzo's best deeds was saving Tokugawa's wife and son, who had been taken hostage by Hattori Hanzo. Tokugawa made it through the Sengoku Jidai and became the shogun. After the wars were over, the feudal lords were very worried about the ninja clans. These clans had learned a lot about the nobility, trade routes, and government corruption. The shogun Tokugawa Yoshimune, the 8th shogun of the Tokugawa lineage, made the Oniwabanshu to keep these clans in line and put an end to their fights. The Oniwabanshu was a secret organization with members of the Iga and Koka clans serving the shogunate. Its main role was to spy on feudal lords to prevent rebellion or corruption. This organization existed officially until the beginning of the Meiji Restoration. It is believed that some members were sent to the United States to spy on the U.S. government during the Meiji Restoration. Samurai and ninja family members were banned from carrying weapons, and in an attempt to end these families, the Japanese government imposed heavy taxes on them. This caused many to flee to other parts of Japan, changing their last name during this period. The image of the ninjas as practicing warriors of magic became popular in Japan, and the West stories about ninjas able to fly, able to run over water, or able to shoot fire with their hands filled the imagination of many people during the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in 1931. Some ninjas were recruited again to spy on the Chinese government. The ninjas were never officially extinct, and some families kept the old names of their ancestors. It's perfectly possible that ninjas are still among us. Nowadays, watching our world as hidden warriors. Saga snooze. In feudal Japan, the samurai were the most important group of warriors. The bravery and loyalty of these elite warriors were legendary, but some of them stood out for their martial skills or ability to lead troops in battle. Minamoto no Yoshitsune was a great samurai and member of the Minamoto clan. He was the 9th son of the Minamoto lineage and fought a war against the Taira clan for control of Japan. After an unsuccessful rebellion against the Taira clan, which had greater military power, Yoshitsune's 2 older brothers were killed. Yoshitsune, still a baby, was sent to be raised in a temple on Mount Hiei, near the city of Kyoto. Legend has it that in his youth, Yoshitsune fled from the supervision of temple monks towards the mountains, where he learned the art of the sword from a supernatural creature known as Tengu. When he came of age, Yoshitsune became a great general. Under his command, the Minamoto destroyed the Taira clan, initiating the first shogunate in Japanese history, the Kamakura shogunate. Kusunoki Masashige is one of the main symbols of loyalty in samurai history. Kusunoki lived during the Kamakura shogunate and served the emperor Go-Daigo. From 1324 to 1339, there was a civil war between the shogunate's forces and the imperial government. Kusunoki fought many battles to protect the imperial family, but there were many enemies who were determined. After defeating the imperial army, the emperor and his family fled to Mount Hiei. Kusunoki knew that they would be found and surrounded, so he gathered the last 700 warriors who were loyal to the emperor and ran down Mount Hiei to fight a much larger group of enemies. Kusunoki Masashige died in that battle with his brother. He gave his life so that the emperor could escape the siege that was about to happen. Tomoe was born into a samurai family around 1157. She learned how to use a bow and arrow and the naginata, a heavy spear that could knock down a horse, when she was a child. Tomoe was not only a fierce warrior, but she was also known for being very beautiful, making her a perfect mix of beauty and danger. Tomoe fought in heavy armor and was always there when the battle was at its most dangerous. There is no clear answer about how she died. Some say she died next to her husband in battle, while others say she lived as a Buddhist nun until the end of her life. Masamune was one of the most famous samurai of the Edo period. Masamune got smallpox when he was a child, which is a disease that spreads and made him lose his right eye. It was a big deal for a warrior to lose an eye, but it didn't stop Masamune. He grew into a young man who was active and driven. When he was 14, he fought in his first battle, helping his father lead the charge against a rival clan. He was already a feared and respected samurai when he was 18. He was easy to spot on the battlefield because he wore a helmet with a crescent moon-shaped ornament on it. Masamune's mother tried to poison him because she thought he was acting too wild and wanted his younger brother to be the heir. Masamune lived through this horrible attack and killed his brother, which made him the Daimyo. He was called Date, the one-eyed dragon. Masamune spent his entire life in battle. He accumulated great wealth, capturing castles and fertile lands. He became famous for allowing European foreigners to enter his territories, creating his own trade routes. His admiration for Western technologies led Masamune to embark on the first maritime expedition in Japanese history. In this expedition, he visited the Philippines, Mexico, Spain, and Rome. Honda Tadakatsu is known as the warrior who overcame his own death in the 55 military campaigns he participated in. He was never injured. They say he wasn't even hit once. Even though he fought actively on the front lines, he served under the command of the mighty Tokugawa Ieyasu and helped pave the way for the creation of the Tokugawa. Shogunate Tadakatsu was a tall samurai and had frightening strength that made him even more dangerous. when he used a spear called Tonbo Giri. He wore a helmet with a big deer antler. His name was known and respected by all daimyos. Even among those who belonged to enemy factions, the famous Oda Nobunaga named him samurai. Among samurais, Sanada Yukimura is one of the most famous samurai of the Sengoku period. Yukimura was known as the Crimson Demon of War and was one of the most skilled warriors in Japan. The Sanada clan served different daimyos during the war, but had a conflict with the powerful Tokugawa clan during a battle in the region of Nakasendo. Yukimura only had 2,000 men with him, but they were able to defeat an army of 40,000 soldiers led by Tokugawa Hidetada. At a military meeting with people from the Sanada clan and the Tokugawa clan, Yukimura promised to kill Tokugawa Ieyasu. During the siege of Osaka, Yukimura led a small group of samurai on horseback toward the enemy army during a battle. He fought his way to where Tokugawa Ieyasu was, and in a brave act, he was able to hurt him. Yukimura, who was very hurt and tired, lost his strength and died. Even Ieyasu, the leader of Japan, thought Yukimura was the best warrior. It is thought that Sanada Yukimura hurt Tokugawa Ieyasu, and that he died a few years later. Oda Nobunaga, who was born in 1534, is one of the most famous people in Japanese history. People thought Nobunaga was a foolish child because he played with kids from lower social classes when he was a kid. Nobunaga was an odd man who liked many different kinds of art, like painting and a type of theater that combined singing, music, and poetry. Nobunaga liked the use of guns in Japan and bought them from European sellers, like the Portuguese. Nobunaga was a great military leader who was able to take over most of Japan during the Sengoku. Jidai beat other strong feudal lords. Akechi Mitsuhide, one of Oda Nobunaga's most important generals, betrayed him at the height of his power. He was trapped inside the Honnoji temple during a coup d'etat and had no way out. Fearing the shame of being caught by his former general, Nobunaga killed himself. He told them to burn the temple before he died, and they never found his body. He was born in Miyamoto village and given the name Shinmen Takeso. His father was a low-ranking samurai who worked for the Tokugawa clan. Musashi was a violent child with a strong personality, and many people in the village where he lived stayed away from him. When Musashi was 13 years old, a samurai named Arima Kihei came to his village to find someone to fight in a duel. Musashi took the challenge and beat the other person, who had a real sword, with just a wooden stick. Musashi fought in the famous Battle of Sekigahara when he was 17 years old, working for Lord Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Musashi started a trip in Japan a few years after the Battle of Sekigahara. He wanted to get better at martial arts, so he challenged kenjutsu schools and even famous samurai who had already shown they were good at it. People all over Japan knew the name Miyamoto Musashi, and many powerful daimyos asked him to work for them. Musashi turned down most of them because he wanted to focus on his own journey. He fought the famous duel with Sasaki Kojiro on the island of Ganryujima in 1612. Musashi beat Kojiro, who had a long sword, and hit him hard in the head with it. Musashi only had one rowing boat. Musashi never lost a duel, even though he fought more than 50 of them. Musashi spent the last years of his life alone in a cave, where he meditated and wrote the famous book, Gorin no Sho, the Book of the Five Rings. Musashi talks about what happened during his duels in this book. He teaches techniques of his Niten Ichi Ryu style, which involved the use of 2 swords. Miyamoto Musashi immortalized his name. He is considered the greatest swordsman of all time, and a legitimate representative of the samurai spirit. Saga snooze. The life of a samurai was full of obligations and codes of conduct that life would be put at the service of a feudal lord whom the samurai would have to obey and protect at all costs. In turbulent times, the samurai were crucial warriors and made a difference on the battlefields. But wars also came to an end. And after all, what purposes do warriors serve when wars are no longer fought? The low-ranking soldiers returned to their lives in the plantations and other daily jobs. But for the dismissed samurai, there were few alternatives to make a living. Many could not bear the shame of seeing their status diminished. They would rather take their own lives to maintain their dignity. Others adapted to the new times. They found a livelihood through trade or open academies to teach the art of the sword. But for those who did not know how to engage in any other activity than combat, all that remained was the destiny full of uncertainties. The former samurais wandered around Japan looking for jobs that needed strength or an intimidating presence. They became known as ronin or wavemen for not staying for long in the same place. Dispersing like the sea waves, the ronin maintained the custom of carrying 2 swords at the waist, but with less authority compared to the times when they had the title of samurai. In fact, many ronin were despised in Japanese society. Most ordinary people did not like the samurai and unburdened the cells of their frustrations on those who had lost their nobility titles. For that reason, a ronin could hardly get an honest job. Many, in order to survive, needed to sell their belongings, including pieces of armor and even one of the swords. Being a ronin wasn't a lifestyle that one would opt for in an attempt to regain the title of samurai. Many ronin began to challenge famous swordsmen, hoping to emerge victoriously. In this way, they could be famous, increasing their chances of being hired by some feudal lord. The ronin agreed to work as paid assassins, mercenaries, and tax collectors. In some cases, they organized themselves into groups to attack government convoys, stealing money and other valuables. That was also a way to take revenge against the feudal lords. The story of the 47 ronin is one of the most fascinating in this story. Daimyo Asano was ordained to commit seppuku after having offended and assaulted Lord Kira Yoshinaka during a ceremony at the Shogun Palace. The 47 samurai under Asano's service were forbidden to follow their lord in death, as was customary at the time, and were relieved of their duties, becoming ronin. Not accepting such an enormous injustice, the 47 ronin spent 3 years in hiding and created a plan to take revenge on Lord Kira when they finally launched the attack. The ronin invaded Lord Kira's mansion. The guards of the mansion had no chance against the group. A vengeful ronin after killing Lord Kira, the ronin were able to follow their master, and they all committed seppuku, thus recovering their honor. The story of the 47 ronin is famous all over Japan. It is seen as an example that honor is above titles and injustices. During the troubled history of feudal Japan, numerous wars were fought that influenced social organization culture and many aspects of the life of the ancient Japanese. The warrior class had a special place in Japanese society, with the famous samurai having the most prestigious position below. Only the nobility or the imperial family, but the samurai were not the only elite warriors to fight on the battlefields, and even they had equally skilled rivals. The wars caused many misfortunes for the Japanese population. There was a constant increase of criminal groups who took advantage of the chaos and instability of governments to attack villages and even sacred temples. The need to defend their sanctuaries caused the Buddhist monks to initiate the practice of martial arts. This was possible because some monks had a violent past as thieves, mercenaries, or even ex-samurai, who then decided to seek a life of peace and harmony around the 10th century. Armed groups of Buddhist monks with the name Sohoi, meaning warrior monk, appeared. They quickly became to be recognized and feared for their military expertise. Religious divisions in the Buddhist branches meant that the Sohei did not have a centralized leadership, but they were commanded by regional leaders with their own interests. Some temples began to maintain a regular army of warrior monks. These were the main ones: Enryaku-ji Temple near Kyoto City, Todai-ji Temple in Nara City, and the Maidera Temple built near Mount Hiei. Many of these temples were fortified, becoming fortresses to prevent the attack of invaders. There was also another group of monks who caused a supernatural fear in their enemies: Yamabushi, the mountain monks. The Yamabushi were monks who lived like hermits in the mountains that were difficult to reach and full of wildlife. There are many mysteries around the Yamabushi, as their religious practices involved exoteric concepts, including the practice of exorcism, divination, and magic. Warrior monks also became more popular, thanks to the support of the lower Japanese classes. Most peasants disliked the samurai and the aristocrats. They thought the monks were a kind of rebel defying the rules and laws imposed by the rulers. For this reason, some people thought that the Sohei monks were holy men, and others considered them evil enemies. Political rivalries between Buddhist temples became even more evident in the 12th century, when feudal lords, Daimyo, began to seek the support of warrior monks in wars. Daimyo promised financial and political support to the temples, which led many Sohei groups to fight each other on opposite sides during the military conflicts. It would be easy to recognize a Sohei monk on the battlefield. His equipment consisted of traditional samurai armor, but with the addition of a wooden rosary around his neck. And sometimes they combined their traditional garments with a white hood over their heads and faces. The Sohei learned how to use a lot of different weapons, but they were best known for how deadly they were with the naginata, a heavy halberd that could deal devastating blows. The Sohei were skilled fighters who fought for their faith and often did crazy things and died to reach their goals. This behavior caused the warrior monks of Japan to be compared in modern times with the medieval knights of the Templar and Teutonic orders. This religious fervor intimidated the enemy troops and increased the admiration of the population, something that wasn't seen with good eyes by the feudal lords, as they feared the growing influence of Sohei and Japanese society. Many daimyo saw the Sohei as a serious threat against the samurai class and even the feudal system. The famous Oda Nobunaga decided to fight the groups of warrior monks on September 29, 1571. Oda Nobunaga and his army of 30,000 men besieged the Enryaku-ji Temple and defeated a large number of monks who had gathered to fight Oda. Thousands lost their lives during the fighting, and the temple was completely destroyed. In the following years, the Sohei were persecuted by Oda Nobunaga and his successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Their temples were destroyed, and they were forced to flee to the mountains with Tokugawa. Ieyasu's military victory in 1603 and the establishment of a strong and organized central government. The monks were forced to surrender and were banned from using weapons. Again, the era of Japanese warrior monks came to an end, but their life philosophies, fighting techniques, and unshakable courage were an inspiration to subsequent generations. Saga snooze. Honor, courage, benevolence, and loyalty are some of Bushido's main virtues. The code of honor that guided the samurai warriors in their life of servitude and personal improvement. For a long time, the samurai were the dominant warrior class on the battlefields of feudal Japan. This superiority came from privileged training in different styles of martial arts and weapons, such as bow and arrow spears and swords. But the advancement of time is inevitable, and progress eventually gave Japan a new kind of weapon. The age of firearms had started in 1543. Portuguese merchants took to Japan a weapon known in the West as arquebus. The Japanese were impressed with the destructive power of the weapon, capable of piercing even the thickest armor. The Japanese quickly created their versions of the firearm. The Tanegashima was used by special units of Ashiguru light infantry soldiers, who represented a large part of the Japanese feudal armies. A few years after its introduction, this new weapon completely changed the way of war. In Japan, firearms were used mainly during the Sengoku period, when Japan plunged into a terrible civil war, where many feudal lords fought for the country's military supremacy. In 1549, the famous Oda Nobunaga ordered 500 weapons for his army. The effectiveness of the Tanegashima was unquestionable compared to other traditional weapons. The estimate says that a professional archer could shoot 15 arrows, while a soldier orange with a rifle had to load the gun and could fire only once the round bullets used, and rifles constantly change direction, making accuracy difficult. Also, there was the problem of humidity and rain, as the gunpowder could become unusable. The Japanese quickly created more effective models that were better able to withstand climate adversities. They also developed new firing techniques. The main one was to aim the weapons at a higher angle, thus increasing the range and creating a rain of bullets on the enemy. Even the proud samurai could not deny the effectiveness of firearms, and gradually began to include shooting training in their daily routines. And contrary to what many think, the samurai did not refuse to use these methods. For them, firearms were another instrument to be mastered and used against the enemies. The greatest honor for a samurai was to defeat as many enemies as possible in a battle, and do their duty for this. He could use a sword or a rifle. The brilliant Japanese craftsman created a powerful variation known as Ozutsu Tanegashima, a heavy hand cannon that required a special posture to be fired. Despite its low accuracy, the cannon could cause great damage, especially if several were fired at the same time. Oda Nobunaga was a great firearms enthusiast, using many at the Battle of Nagashino. In 1575, where he faced Takeda Shingen's army. Takeda Shingen's cavalry was the strongest and most feared in all of Japan. At the time, still it failed to defeat the 3,000 men armed with Tanegashima under Nobunaga's command, definitely marking the defeat of the Takeda clan. The demand for firearms was so great that for a long time, Japan manufactured more firearms than all of Europe. With the end of the wars and the beginning of the Edo period, which established 250 years of peace in Japan, firearms lost importance
becoming restricted to activities such as castle defenses, hunting and training during almost the entire Edo period. Japan interrupted trade with foreigners, and the Tanegashima technology stagnated in 1867. Japan reopened its doors to the outside world during the Meiji era. They knew that their weapons were already very old because Europeans and Americans used newer, better models. The Japanese put an end to the samurai era and embraced a new modern system of military recruitment, importing new weapons into Japan and establishing the Japanese Imperial Army. Today, many works represent the samurai as warriors who only use the sword and despise firearms. But as history shows, they not only used firearms, but also had a great appreciation for the new technology that would change the world forever on the battlefields of medieval Japan. The sound of swords could be heard in the distance. Courage or cowardice were always present during the terrible battles. Some samurai performed heroic acts worthy of having their names recorded in history. One of these samurai was Takeda Shingen, who lived during the famous period of Sengoku Jidai, also known as the Warring States era. Shingen was born in Kai Prefecture, a mountainous region west of Tokyo.
He was the son of the Takeda clan leader, and right from childhood, he was trained and educated to be his father's successor. In his youth, he already showed signs that he would be a great military leader. Shingen assumed a role of great importance in the Takeda clan. By the age of 15, he was already helping his father command troops in a battle against a rival clan. But when Shingen came of age, he rebelled against his father. He felt the Takeda clan should strengthen itself and conquer new lands. His father, on the other hand, was content only to protect his borders. And so, at the age of 21, Takeda Shingen became the leader of the powerful Takeda clan, conquering the title. A Daimyo Takeda Shingen was a perfect example of a samurai. He was a skillful and fearless warrior, a daring commander, and a refined man who was very fond of music and poetry. He was easily recognized in battle as he wore intimidating armor with red and gold colors and a great white mane. When Takeda Shingen was 49 years old, his clan was one of the few capable of taking on the mighty Oda Nobunaga, who had already begun his campaign to unify Japan. Uesugi Kenshin was a powerful daimyo, who also lived during the Sengoku Jidai. He was born in Echigo Prefecture, and his childhood was quite troubled. His father was a famous warlord who was always in conflict with neighboring clans. At the age of 7, his father was killed in battle. Kenshin was sent to be raised in a Buddhist temple, where he lived the next 8 years of his life. At 14, Uesugi, Kenshin returned to his homeland. He deposed his older brother to take control of his birth clan. In the following years, Kenshin focused his efforts on improving living conditions in Echigo province, establishing new business alliances and new buildings. Uesugi Kenshin was famous for being an honorable and eccentric warrior. He was a fervent Buddhist follower and a follower of Bishamonten, the god of war. People called him the Dragon of Echigo because of how good he was as a warrior and military leader. Uesugi's life was peaceful for a short time. Takeda Shingen wanted to take over new land, so he went to places near the province of Echigo. This is how one of Japan's most famous rivalries started: Uesugi Kenshin versus Takeda Shingen, or the Tiger of Kai versus the Dragon of Echigo. Uesugi and Takeda spent many years in arduous battles, but neither side was able to take advantage. But in 1561, Kenshin defeated Takeda's army forces and almost defeated him in battle during that battle. Uesugi Kenshin identified an opening in the defenses of the opposing army and quickly seized the opportunity. He instigated his horse and passed Takeda's personal guards, putting the two powerful generals face to face in battle. Kenshin struck a few sword blows against Takeda. He managed to defend himself in extremis, using a fan made of wood known as tessen. The duel was broken off when Takeda's personal guards managed to drive Uesugi away, forcing him to retreat to his troops. Uesugi and Takeda are said to have nurtured mutual respect and aberration after several years of battle. They came to know each other's strengths and weaknesses. That respect became clearer during a particular episode. There was a lack of salt in Kai province, and since salt was highly valued at the time, this was a difficult problem to solve. Upon learning of this, Uesugi sent many sacks of salt to Kai province. Although these were his declared enemies, this noble act moved to Takeda Shingen, who out of respect for his rival suspended the war for a period of time. This legendary rivalry ended abruptly with Takeda Shingen's death. After defeating a large army made up of the Oda and Tokugawa clans, Takeda Shingen went back to his military camp, where he died in a strange way. People think he died of pneumonia, but other sources say he was shot by a sniper. Uesugi Kenshin said, "I lost my great rival. We will never have another hero like that." Now that the Takeda clan was weaker, it looked like nothing could stop Oda Nobunaga and his huge army. At Matsumoto Castle, Kenshin gathered 30,000 warriors to face Oda Nobunaga's 50,000-man army. Even though the two armies were different, Uesugi was able to win the battle and make the enemy retreat. Uesugi Kenshin kept fighting for his clan until he got sick and died in 1578. The story of these two great generals is both heroic and sad, because they fought on opposite sides. In a sad and terrible war, these people, who might have been friends at other times, were on opposite sides. Saga Snooze.